welcome to Uncommon Sense, where we do our best to make it common again. I'm your host, Adrian Ahlquist, and today I'm joined with yet another person who's featured in My Name is Lazarus. I'm not kidding about this series. And we're going to keep going through the people that have amazing conversion stories. And so today I'm joined with Tod Worner. Tod, how are you?
Adrian, I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Really good. Good. Yeah, it's MEA weekend over here, so no school. But yeah, so let's just get into your conversion story that you mentioned in My Name is Lazarus, and you can tell it with your own spin, because I know it's been a while since you've written the thing featured. So yeah.
Sure, you bet. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on this podcast, and it's a wonderful service you're doing for the Society of G.K. Chesterton, and I follow it, and I'm just indebted to your dad for his introduction to me of Chesterton. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. That means a lot. Thank you.
Glad to be here. You know, my conversion story. I was raised as a Lutheran in a family that was, a weekly church going, praying before meals, talked about God, read the Bible, and just a very faith-filled family upbringing. And I didn't think I would veer away from Lutheranism. I was content. I was happy. I felt I had a personal relationship with Christ. And it wasn't until I got into college that in my senior year of college, that I came across this beautiful young woman named Carrie. And Carrie swept me off my feet. And we got to know each other, became good friends. And sure enough, one thing leads to another. We started falling in love. And I thought, this is going to be great. We're ultimately going to probably get married. But one of the little wrinkles we had to iron out was the notion that she was Catholic and that I was Lutheran. And
wow, this sounds a lot like the beginning of Stuart Colner's story. I remember.
Generally speaking, I imagine these kind of stories, when you come across them as I have as well, they end up being a little bit. There's a little bit of
similarity, right?
Yeah, and there's drama and so on. So bottom line is that I started being kind of this open-minded guy who thought I had no anti-Catholic biases. And basically thought, well, I know I'm not going to become Catholic, so Carrie should become Lutheran. Or if she's not going to become Lutheran, maybe we should go and shop around and find maybe Episcopalian is a nice kind of a middle ground, or non-denominational and so on. And my wife very clearly and very lovingly said, I'm Catholic. I'm not going to be something that I'm not, which was grating to me because I love her so much, and yet I wanted her to sort of move towards me. Mm-hmm. So it began what was effectively a 14-year discussion, debate, argument about Protestantism versus Catholicism. And the bottom line is, we ended up getting married in the Catholic Church in the year 2000. And the deal that she and I kind of made was that while we get married in the Catholic Church, we'd raise our kids Lutheran. And my wife is smarter than I am. And I think she got the deal on the front end. And what happened over the course from our marriage, we got married in 2000 and I converted in 2010. What happened over that 10 years was we would alternate every other weekend. We go to Lutheran church, and then go to mass and so on. I came across the readings of Chesterton. I was introduced to the story of John Paul II. I started reading Benedict XVI. A good friend of mine who's a fellow physician introduced me to Evelyn Waugh and Flannery O'Connor and George Bernanot. And then your dad introduced me to Chesterton. And what happened was effectively a slow softening, if you will, of an opinion about the Catholic faith. And to some extent, it was the scales were falling from my eyes, that all these misgivings I had started to fall away. And it was the favorite quote of mine of Chesterton's that I would say over and over again during the course of my conversion, and even to this day, I would paraphrase is the Catholic faith has not been tried and found wanting; it's been found difficult and left untried.
Yep. I remember that's that was your title to your. Yeah, it's a good quote. Yeah.
Right. So to some extent, there's many people that have conversion stories that are like Paul. They get knocked off the horse, and then they kind of figure things out, and it's pretty dramatic. Mine was more of a painting of a portrait, where it's one solitary brushstroke at the time, and then at the end of it all, you're looking and you're saying, I did not imagine that was going to be the picture I was going to be seeing towards the end. So I came into the Catholic faith in 2010. And it has been a glorious, as I think C.S. Lewis said it, called it a glorious defeat. One of the best things that's ever happened to me in my entire life. My kids are in Catholic schools. We're very involved in our local parish. And I've been writing and working on behalf of the Catholic faith in addition to my medical practice ever since.
That's really awesome. Yeah. Wow. And I want to get into what you do in the medical world in a bit. Uh, yeah, I remember in your story, the first book you read was Orthodoxy,
Yep.
which is a standard good and entering into Chesterton. Yeah, and I think that's where the quote comes from. I could be wrong about that, so don't don't quote me.
I think you're right. I think you're
Yeah.
right. But then again, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What drew you to Orthodoxy? Do you remember? Because
Well,
I know it was a while ago.
so it's a great question. So I was this was during it was 2002, 2003. I was a second year internal medicine resident, and I was reading this total hit job on Pius XII by John Cornwell. It's called Hitler's Pope. It got all sorts of coverage and so on, and it was just it's not great research, and
Mhm.
it's kind of a, as you probably remember, that it was kind of just a hit job.
Mhm.
And I was reading it, and I was kind of confirming my own biases. This is, my wife and I have been married. We are going alternating between the Catholic and Lutheran Church, but I'm still not. I haven't bought into Catholicism. And I'm reading this book, and it just so happened that whenever I would be teaching the medical students as a second year internal medicine resident, I'd be teaching the medical students. We'd have 6 weeks with them, and we really got to know them well. And I loved talking to them and learning about what they're reading and so on.
Yeah.
And at the end of every rotation, at the end of 6 weeks, I'd bring them to Williams Pub in Uptown, and we'd buy some rounds of drinks and eat peanuts and just talk about everything. And one of the medical students knew I was reading Hitler's Pope, and on the last night when we were at Williams Pub, he basically pulled out this old beaten up image copy of Orthodoxy, and he said, "Have you ever read this?"
Mhm.
And I said, "No, I haven't." He goes, I think you'd like it." And so I took this book, and I was pretty impressed that this kid, and I think he went to St. John's, and just a thoughtful, good person. And I pocketed that book, and then I came back to it on a trip down to Ixtapa, Mexico, and I was lying on the beach reading Orthodoxy. And while there were flashes of interesting quotes and so on, I closed the book and I turned to my wife sitting on the chair next to me, and I said, "I have no idea what he just said." And I was just kind of stymied, and I thought, well, Chesterton's overrated. He's uninterpretable. He's a difficult read, and I think it's just I've done my part and I'm done. But I will say that the years would pass, and I would read others of Chesterton's books, believe it or not, but quotes. I'd read your dad's Gilbert magazine. I talk to people, and they'd recommend other readings. And I came back to Orthodoxy 4 years later, and I was stunned. I was just utterly stunned at how brilliant it was. And
Awesome.
there's a great quote, if I can say, from Antonin Scalia, Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia, who talks about when one of the lessons he learned from one of his English professors at a Jesuit school, I think it was in the Bronx, when he was growing up. And when some kid was sort of mocking Shakespeare and saying what a waste of time it was, the Jesuit priest looked at him and said, with his Boston accent, "When y'all reading Shakespeare, Shakespeare's not on trial, you are." And I realized that with Chesterton, especially in reading Orthodoxy, it wasn't that Chesterton was overrated and uninterpretable and not a worthy read. It was that I was not ready for him, and I need to be primed a little bit more. And in coming to reappreciate Orthodoxy, and I've read it probably 12 or 13 times since that time, which is the only book I've actually ever done that with, I've been blown away by the genius and how wonderful it is to be humbled, only to start to appreciate the truths he was saying, and I've been changed ever since.
That's awesome. Yeah. Before we go on, I have an embarrassing revelation. The quote, the found wanting quote, is not in Orthodoxy.
What is it?
It's in What's Wrong with the World. That my dad might kill me.
Well, I know if anybody's got to keep the record straight, it's you. So
yeah. So I
appreciate the correction.
Yeah, I secretly looked that up while you were talking. So it's the Christian ideal has not been tried and found wanting. It's been found difficult and left untried. Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. So I'm glad we clarified that. Otherwise, there would be just carnage and panic. But what I was going to say is, I've given the book Orthodoxy to some friends, and it was just kind of over their head. They weren't in the realm of humanities or anything. They were in the sciences. So they weren't used to the meaty humanities. And then I give them my dad's book, The Apostle of Common Sense, and they do cling on to that one, because that's the whole point of that book, is to introduce the modern world into Chesterton. So would you agree with that?
I would. And by the way, I want to commend what your dad has done with those books. The Apostle, and I have them right over here, but The Apostle of Common Sense and gosh, I have Common Sense 101, the Catholic Thinker. For him to help condense and make Chesterton approachable, it's been masterful. And I will also say, I don't know if it was Richard John Newhouse who said it, or if it was William F. Buckley, or somebody once said, maybe it was your dad, somebody once said, when it comes to Chesterton, I need to read him in small pieces, and I need to stand up and walk away and just think about it for a little while, only to come back and kind of immerse myself in his riches all over again. And that's why when people, and I wrote a piece on this, on how to read G.K. Chesterton for a different website at one point, if people are like, how would you recommend it? I would say literally go to the Society of G.K. Chesterton website, look at the quotes, and start there, and just ruminate on just one or two of the tidbits, the paradoxical genius insights, and walk away with it. And then you'll start to say, maybe I'll approach one of his essays, or maybe I'll approach The Man Who Was Thursday, and then work your way up to orthodoxy.
Yeah.
So what, again, I'm not trying to lay it on thick, but it's so true. What the society has done for Chesterton in terms of making him approachable to a world that is kind of deaf and blind, it has been nothing short of remarkable.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Yeah, I'll give my thanks to my dad, definitely. Well, I'll have him watch this, actually. Yeah, I wanted to say, I mean, while we're talking about the way Chesterton writes and stuff in this style, some people have a hard time, I know, with kind of his thought process, and because it is atypical. It's not very, you know what? It's funny because how much he likes Aquinas and how much his philosophy echoes Aquinas. I think he writes kind of differently than Aquinas. Aquinas will, in a Summa, he lays out the question, he answers the antithesis, and then he gives the objections, and he says what he thinks, and it's very structured. Whereas Chesterton, I would say, writes more like he's writing a story. He's writing a story in nonfiction, because it's very hard to track, the point of a story if until the very end. You dwell on the morality and stuff like that, but it's all over the place in a way. But it's not messy or anything. So that's I don't know. That's my comment on the way he writes. What would you think?
I would agree with you. And I think what's interesting is that you can similar, I think it was C.S. Lewis that talked about that you need to read books that matter, not just once, but 20 or 30 times.
Yeah.
And obviously we're so busy and distracted, and there's so much to choose from, how can you ever do that? But orthodoxy, for instance, and any of Chesterton's works, I feel what's amazing is how, I'll underline stuff, 1 year, and then I'm underlining or circling something else the next year. It speaks to at different stages, and that's honestly, and I think you guys do this at Chesterton Academy a lot as well. The notion of reading great literature that is a little bit challenging to you is a good practice, because, and especially rereading it, because you were a different person at a different stage in your life. I mean, I think it's Heraclitus that says the boy that steps in the river and comes back and steps in again as a man, he's changed as a man, but so is the river. I'm totally murdering that. But the bottom line is literature is similar, that Hamlet means something different to you, or Chesterton means something different to you when you're 16 than it does when you're 36 than it does when you're 66. Mm-hmm. And our role is not to just cast it aside or to haughtily say, oh, I read Macbeth, and when I was 17, I never have to read it again. It's like, you know what? You never really read it because you tried, but you got exposed to it. You have a sense about what it means, but the rest of your life is going to be plumbing about the deeper meanings behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really cool. I'm glad we got to talk about that, because I know that is an objection to the way Chesterton writes sometimes. But yeah. Do you want to talk about your medical practice now? I think this is a good time. There's not an easy segue into that, but
no, I'm happy to. So I've been practicing internal medicine in the Twin Cities. Initially, it was a mixed practice, outpatient and inpatient. Now it's largely outpatient, kind of on the west side of the Twin Cities. I love practicing medicine. The reason why I like practicing outpatient medicine is you develop long-lasting relationships with people. And you age with them, and you walk with them through their maladies. You see them through different diseases. Sometimes there's diseases you can't fix, and so you're walking through and just being with them in the midst of the difficulties. You celebrate with them the births of children or grandchildren and the deaths of spouses. You see people who are on their 10th year of sobriety. It's an amazing thing, and you realize how broken we are, and yet how dignified we are. in the work that we're doing day in and day out. So to some extent, the practice of medicine in of itself is phenomenal. What I feel blessed in doing is the ability to teach a lot of medical students and residents, and whether it's diabetic management, heart failure management, pneumonia, diagnostic skills, so on and so forth. What I've come to realize is there is in this age of efficiency, of technique, of utilitarianism, there's been a bleeding out of the sense of vocation in medicine. And so part of what I've tried to do is try to bring to these residents, medical students, great things to read. So I'll give them talks on how Shakespeare can teach you about the practice of medicine. I teach them about William Osler, who put Johns Hopkins on the map, and the ethic by which he taught. They're reading Yeats. They're reading certain aspects of Chesterton. They're reading Robert Frost. They're reading speeches by Lord Moulton on law and manners, on the notion that there is an ought, and that our practice is not just checking the boxes. It's realizing you're giving your all to somebody who's in need. So I bring that, and
cool,
so I think the long and the short is, let's be honest, when a person comes to see a doctor, I mean, yeah, they want to get better. That's the fundamental thing. But what they really want to do, is they want to encounter somebody who gives a damn. And I'm telling you, you and I both know there's people that are looking past you all the time, that ask how you are and don't stay for the answer, that are multitasking and totally distracted. And I, don't get me wrong, I'm imperfect. I have my moments of distraction as well. But there's a lot of burnout in any field, but especially in medicine, because that sense of vocation has gone in the name of efficiency. And to some extent, what I'm trying to do in this teaching, and I bring this to teaching at St. John's as well, is let's reclaim the universals in the literature out there, like Shakespeare, like Dostoevsky, like Plutarch and Montaigne and so on. And let's bring that to the daily practice. And it's not that you don't have to read about heart failure and which diabetic medication to use, but you need to know you need to form the lens by which you're going to practice medicine. And that's formed by delving into the deeply vocational and the deeply human. And so wow. I don't think a lot of people are doing that. And frankly, the feedback I get is I've missed that. I felt like I've been less human going into medical school. And this stuff reminds me of what it is like to reclaim the humanity.
That's wow. Okay, cool. I wanted to talk about how morality fits into the medical world, because if you're saying that you feel like you're less human going in, they probably don't integrate ideas of morality really well. I mean, I'm sure they touch on it, but I bet they talk about it in terms of ethical speech. Have you encountered their distinction between morality and ethics? Because I came across that in college, and it's an interesting kind of new idea that how they're differentiating ethics from morality. They would say that morality is what you believe, in terms of, well, I mean, it's what you believe, and then ethics is what the majority believes. Right. And that's what they would say, even though that's not true for the definitions in the long run at all. But it was so jarring. Yeah. Have you heard something like that?
Yeah. And I think what's interesting is sadly, what I think has happened is I think there's a lot of people that really, the sense of do the right thing has informed their decision going into medicine. These are very bright people that could have made more money going into business or going into what have you. And they chose to incur huge amounts of debt, sacrifice an immense amount of time because they want to make a difference. So I think at the fundamental level, there's a sense that they want to make the difference. And are led by a sense of moral urgency. I think the sad thing is less than these distinctions of ethics and morals is I think they don't talk about it at all. And I mean, meaning that I think they're pulled in so many different directions that it's sort of like, how do I just sort of get through the day? And there's a wonderful essay by a intern, she's now a practicing physician, named Sonia Singh, was in the New England Journal of Medicine, called Morning Report. And I teach, this is one of the essays I give. And it's just about all day long how this intern is just caught up in, she's got to race through the day, see 14 different patients. She's got to do all these exams, talk to the nurses, talk to the social worker, talk to the family, write these orders, et cetera, et cetera. And she's got to do all this stuff to begin with, up and down flights of stairs, et cetera, answering her pagers by 10 o'clock in the morning, because she has to go to Morning Report. And you go to Morning Report, and that's where you're sitting and you're on the chopping block to be asked tough questions by the chief resident about something that you just maybe don't know.
Yeah.
And she talks in that essay about how she has a moment with a patient who clearly looks like she's going to be diagnosed that day with pancreatic cancer, and it's going to be terminal. And she has a moment where she just sits down and holds her hand, and they both get emotional. And then the patient, who is a former nurse, says, you got to go, just go have a great day, and so on. And the resident leaves, and she goes down to morning report, and she's getting a page saying, indeed, it's pancreatic cancer. And then at that very moment, she's caught flat-footed, not realizing the whole room's staring at her, and she's being asked a question that she has no idea what the answer is, and she feels humiliated. And the point being, the heavier emotion on her is the humiliation to not know the answer in front of her friends, but she knows that the proper emotion that should matter the most is that moment of deep intentionality that she had with this dying patient. And she basically writes this to say, I want to tell any burned out intern out there that this over here is the reason you practice medicine. It's not because of this. You got to know your stuff. You got to be tough, but you definitely got to keep in mind that this is a human issue, a human endeavor that basically should never lose sight of the dignified person sitting in front of you who has a large need.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm always amazed at the jobs that doctors and nurses have, because like you said, they are gutted through all the years and time and money that they have to spend. And then their emotions are constantly challenged every single day with this, and they have to they're like soldiers. It's pretty amazing. Yeah.
Well, and I would say, for Adrian, for you and the work that you're doing too, you run into this where there's aspects of your daily life and your daily work that require an incredible amount of training, and you have to carry yourself in a certain way, and you have to be efficient, and you got to meet the needs of family and profession and so on. I think it's interesting because I think it's a deeply, deeply human problem, and sometimes it's emphasized a little bit more in one profession, maybe a little bit more than another, but it's all there. And I think there is a hollowness in the soul when we get consumed by that. And there's a wonderful book, by the way, by Alan Jacobs, called The Year of Our Lord 1943, that speaks to this kind of dearth of a sense of calling and a sense of God, effectively, that came out of World War II. Like in the middle of the war, you had some great minds that started saying, how are we going to rebuild upon this? Mm-hmm. And instead, what sort of happens in the end, I'm not giving the book away, but there is that intoxication with efficiency and achievement and technique as at the cost of our soul. And so you get it. You can resonate with that story because to some extent you understand the pressures you're under every single day as well.
Yeah. And I resonate with the idea of efficiency and how that can take over, because I majored in industrial and systems engineering, and the nickname for that is efficiency engineering. So we're most concerned with optimization. But yeah, that can take over, and that can definitely have bad effects, because sometimes the thing you're trying to optimize is only optimized in the near future and not in the long future. That's the big one. Is it's not, they don't, there's a lack of investment sometimes, and if you're not seeing returns right away, that's a bad thing in that world. So I want to point that out.
Let me, Adrian, if I can interrupt you, let me ask you this: how has your Chestertonian sensibility informed what you learned in your education as an efficiency engineer?
Yes. Okay. There's a Chesterton quote, and I'm gonna really butcher it.
Your dad should turn away right now.
Yeah, I know. It's we've learned to do a great many things in the world of science, but the next question we have to ask is should we do them? We're not asking the question, should we do it? We can do them.
Yes.
We're able to figure that out. But that's definitely the motto in that world, because like going back to the idea of morality, it's not really understood well. They switch it out with the word ethics, and they clearly don't have this idea, this truth, because that's what morality and both ethics and morality is trying to get at, is what is true. Not, you can't take that out. So, can't become a relativist. So yeah, that's what I would say off the bat.
Fantastic.
Yeah. But, okay. So the last thing I wanted to talk about with regard to the medical world is how health plays a role. How people maybe have a skewed idea of morality sometimes, but there's also the idea of health is very promulgated, right? Have you encountered that?
Absolutely. I mean, where health where health becomes the god, where the people that can be very fundamentalistic about health at all costs, supplements at all costs, preservation of life at all costs.
Mhm.
And generally speaking, I would say my patient population is really, generally speaking, I mean, very, very commonsensical. But I do see, especially if you look at the literature that we have, the mainstream literature we have, I think it's dangerous to make health into a god. Isn't there a Chesterton? What's the Chesterton? Higgins was a
Yes.
heathen. Is that? Yeah,
I
yeah.
I sympathize with you.
I just love that one. And anybody who hasn't read, is it called Higgins Was a Heathen, or is that what it's called, or
Maybe. Okay,
yeah,
here, how about this? The people who are watching on YouTube, your job is to find these quotes and put them in it with the label so that we we have some sort of reference. That's the task at hand. But yeah.
and it's an outstanding poem, and it's kind of it's totally tongue in cheek, but it's got deep and penetrating truths about the notion of living a very, very tight and tepid lifestyle,
Mhm.
so as to live, drink tepid tea and avoid this and avoid that and so on. And at the end of the day, it's sort of this again, I use the word tepid existence, that yes, you've prolonged your life, but your life has become sort of this pure mediocrity of that lacks any willingness to put out into the deep and take great risks and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
So no, I think the fundamentalism that can come from somebody, somebody should never smoke a cigar, or heaven help us if someone is 5 pounds or 10 pounds overweight. I mean, life is meant to be lived, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
at the end of the day, yeah, I mean, if there's somebody who's an alcoholic, then you shouldn't drink. No question about it. If someone has major lung issues, then you should leave the tobacco away. But the long and the short of it is that we got to have a sense of proportionality to what
Mhm.
life is all about. And just like the science, on a larger notion, science is a wonderful tool. It's a lousy god. And I would say health goals are wonderful aspirations, but once again, they serve as a lousy god.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I had another friend, and I won't name anyone by name, but I had another friend who identified as an ethical hedonist. I think I'm getting it right, but the problem is, uh, I think we were having a conversation about what led to the happiest life, and I think the only variable that he wanted to maximize was longevity. So that yeah, like you're saying, that doesn't make much sense. That can't be the only one, because you could have a miserable life and then you're extending it longer. There's just, you can think of problems with that. You can I'm at a loss, but yeah.
I
That's
agree, and it's funny because I think, again, I'm so glad we're on a Chesterton show, because I can actually talk about Chesterton over and
yeah,
over
yeah.
again. But when he rips a little bit on T.S. Eliot, and I don't think it was the Hollow Men that ends with, effectively the world ends with a whimper instead of a bang. And Chesterton says, you may end with a whimper, but we're going to end with a bang.
Nice.
And then there's something to be said about, yes, stay between the guardrails, so you're not engaging in seriously dangerous activity, but let's live vibrantly.
Mhm.
Let's live with exuberance. Let's not be fearful of the great beyond that comes with death, because we believe in a Christ and a heaven that comes afterwards. But let's, in owning that death has glories after it, let's also recognize the glories and the exuberance that life has in the present. And so I advocate common sense, Chestertonian common sense on that front.
Nice. That's why we're called, uh paradoxically, uncommon sense, but we're trying to turn it
Yes,
into
yes,
common sense. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Cool. That's awesome. Well, the last thing I had on the docket was the fact that you work at Word on Fire, and I had Brandon Vaught on the show, about 13 episodes ago, and it was great. But it's really cool to have another person from Word on Fire on. Do you want to talk about what you do there?
I do. I'll first say that since you already had Brandon on, I'm sorry for all your viewers to realize what a letdown I am compared to listening to Brandon.
No,
So,
no.
I'm happy to follow kind of in his shadow. No, it's Word on Fire has been a wonderful, wonderful ministry to work with. Bishop Barron is extraordinary. Father Steve Grunow as CEO. I can't tell you enough about the community, which I know you also have within the confines of the Society for G.K. Chesterton. Extraordinary people, deeply giving people, deeply devoted to sharing the faith, evangelizing the greater culture, which is in such need of evangelization. My side of working is with the Word on Fire Institute. Jared Zimmer serves as the director and Matt Nelson as the associate director, but extraordinary enterprise that's got videos and films and books and so on for its members that help in seriously evangelizing a culture that is, again, like Flannery said, deaf and effectively blind. So you need to sometimes draw large and startling figures, or you need to speak loudly. What I do there is I serve as a fellow. So I make videos. One I just did was on From Books to Ballads, and it's about how great books can make wise Catholics, in which I talk about everybody from Shakespeare to Belloc to Bob Dylan and others. But I'm also the managing editor of the journal Evangelization and Culture. And so I'm just going to show this. This is a shameless plug, but this is Evangelization and Culture.
Oh, go for it.
It's a quarterly journal. And all I can say is the design work of Roseanne Lee and Cassie Pease and Claire Lococo are just extraordinary. And the writing and work of everybody that submits to this, whether it's N.T. Wright or Gary Saul Morrison or Chris Kazor, it's extraordinary. So cool. The point is,
I'll put the links in the description.
I appreciate it, because a lot of what you guys are doing, and I'm a member of the Society for G.K. Chesterton, in bringing Christ to the culture, but especially through the lens of what Chesterton has to offer, we're trying to do something similar with the Word on Fire Institute. So it's really, you guys we're brothers in Christ in doing this stuff, and it's been an extraordinary enterprise. And I hope that, I think our world is, as you know, 2020 has been one heck of a year, and I
no,
think,
really,
yeah, newsflash. But I'm hoping that people can recognize there are champions of a greater truth out there in our respective organizations, but especially under the umbrella of the Catholic Church. And so,
yeah,
thank you for letting me say a word or two about that.
No, yeah, thank you for all your kind words. I could not have promoted the society better myself, and that's my job. So, but
you do it well enough. You do it well enough.
No, but I want to say a word about Word on Fire. I want a word about Word on Fire. A lot of our fans, if they're fans of Chesterton, a lot of them like Word on Fire. They've sometimes I think have come through them, because Brandon Vaught has a leg in a foot in both societies. And
yes.
And yeah, no, I agree. It's amazing. I watched all of Bishop Barron's videos, and I really love them. So it's just a great thing. So I'll put that link in the description. And is there a link for Evangelization and Culture? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, if you do Word on Fire Institute, just I think I can actually give it to you after offline, but it's Word on Fire Institute, and then there's also, I think it's Evangelization and Culture Journal, but I can email them to you or what have you.
Yeah, perfect. All right, awesome. Yeah, I think that's all I have. Did you want to say anything else, or?
No, I want to say, I want to implore everybody who, if you're not a member of the Society of G.K. Chesterton, I can just tell you that my Catholic faith has been made so much better by the work of Dale, Adrian, all the people that are members, but you just helped bring great truth through Chesterton to me, and that's only enhanced my faith. So, and of course, I'd love you to join the Word on Fire Institute as well.
Absolutely.
But thank you for what you're doing, Adrian.
No, thank you. That's awesome. Thank you, Todd. Sincerely. That's great. And thank you for being on the show, on the podcast. It's great. I think you rival Brandon Vaught's.
Oh, you're getting that. Now this is flattery, which I'll take every bit of it. So
nice. Perfect. And thank you everyone for listening. And until next time, help us to make uncommon sense more common.